Welcome to the coolest class you never got to take. Where else do you get to think about how important TV is in your life? How important it is in society? It's right here in your ears. You, me, and in this season, we're joined by some really smart guests. You'll learn an awful lot about how changes to cable TV led to the explosion of programming capacity, and we saw more women, and how original and recycled content filled that time. Please share this episode, recommend us to friends and family, press play for someone who hasn't quite nailed that technology thing. Thanks for listening.
TV Herstorians, welcome to another installment of Advanced TV Herstory. This being part of the season that we're bringing you that is all about TV for women and TV about women. And you can't go too far in any conversation about TV for women without stumbling into that large mountain known as Lifetime. And Lifetime Network has had a couple different iterations and also has quite a record, actually, for made-for-TV movies. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Emily Newman. We are always thrilled to have scholars, true scholars of media and gender and all of the studies that help us better understand TV and TV women on this podcast. And it's a great opportunity for us to better understand how scholars fit into that understanding and in ways that we never even thought about. You know what? It's not just about TV Guide. I encountered Emily Newman because I found that she has co-edited a book that is, I think, well, I'm going to ask Emily to share a little bit about the reason why the book came to be and what it means for her in terms of some of her scholarly pursuits. Emily Newman is at Texas A&M University at the Commerce campus. So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you and help us understand your interest in TV for women and how it is that you came to edit the book with the other Emily.
Sure. So I grew up in Oklahoma and have always loved TV as long as I can remember. And I went to school and eventually got my degree in art history, which sounds like it's really different than TV, but it's all about visual culture and how we perceive and understand the visual things in front of us. As I was writing my dissertation, I was watching TV. And one of the things I was doing as I was writing is I was talking a lot about culture, discussing Oprah and her weight loss and things like that. And I realized that I learned almost everything I know about eating disorders from Lifetime movies. And so I was looking for research to help support this idea in my dissertation, and there was none. So I kind of joked for about 10 years, actually, that I was going to write a book on Lifetime one day. And then when I got my current position, I met my colleague, Emily Witzel, who's now my former colleague, but we ended up getting to know each other and quickly, I think maybe even in our first meeting, found out that we both like Lifetime. But we just kept talking about it and watching movies together and commenting on them. And she's a librarian. And so one day at a librarian conference that I was with, we went up to a press and said, "Hey, do you guys want a book on Lifetime? We want to write one." And they were like, "Sure." So that's sort of how it evolved.
And the name of the book is?
It is The Lifetime Network, Essays on Television for Women in the 21st Century. So most of the essays in the book focus on the past almost 20 years of Lifetime. There'd been a little research on the early years of the network. We were more interested in kind of this current wave of programming and ideas that were on the network. One of the things I like to say about Lifetime is it's the most progressive channel on TV that no one's really paying attention to. And I think because they are often not taken seriously, they're dismissed. And one of the reasons, of course, is just that it's television for women. Therefore, it's chick TV and not as important, which, of course, I don't agree with. But they have more flexibility to do what they want and can take risks that you don't see major networks being able to do. So I actually think they've done some really interesting things in the past 20 years.
You have included chapters from scholars, from people in academia throughout the United States. Was it difficult to find others who were sort of thinking about the importance and the work that Lifetime TV, its role in our culture today?
It wasn't too difficult. We have since done a book on ABC Family and Freeform that was much easier to find things on. But there were definitely people who had been thinking about Lifetime, some of the programming, especially really significant things like Army Wives was a really popular show for a long time. So there were these articles out there that I just kind of searched for, found some different scholars. The cool part about the text is that it is people from all different fields whose work kind of comes together, which is a really nice way of thinking about the television station, I think.
As a reader, I found it a very, very easy to read. So listeners, if you are interested in this, the book is available in a digital version. And then it is available, Emily, right, as a physical. So again, it's called Lifetime
The Network, Essays on Television for Women in the 21st Century.
Thank you. And the essays are written for a regular reader, not necessarily an academic reader, which makes it something for any TV fan, any woman or man who's interested in better understanding this particular channel's impact on American culture and really worldwide culture, because much of, and we're going to discuss this, much of what Lifetime's original programming has now been repackaged, sold, distributed, and is found all across all sorts of cable channels today. So, Emily, where did you get your art degree from then and your PhD?
I got my undergrad degree from Carleton College, and then I got my master's from Penn State University and my PhD from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York.
Listeners, I've poured through the book, compiled by Emily Newman and Emily Witzel. As one who doesn't spend too much time in the realm of reality TV, I found myself learning a lot from the chapters in the book dedicated to Lifetime's work in reality TV. And there is plenty of reality TV right on Lifetime, as well as across cable, as you know. And plenty of books are written today about reality TV, both from the broadcast network perspective, YouTube, streaming, cable. There is this entire niche. And you don't have to go far to find the books that correspond to those shows, the podcasts, the fan sites. It's all there. And you well know, too, that we here at Advanced TV Herstory are inclined to leave that fertile field of reality TV to others for an interpretation. Because instead, my eye, admittedly, tends to wander to aspects of TV that have stood the test of time and are uniquely aligned with TV Herstory. In another 10 years from now, reality TV will have built a bit of a herstory, but for now, we're still looking back at some tremendous content and trends and themes that we saw 30 years ago. And so it's in this season of Advanced TV Herstory that we delve into the television about women and for women, and this TV herstory that includes a chapter about eating disorders.
The one chapter that you wrote for your book, and it was about Lifetime's, whether they were intending it or not, they developed an entire genre around eating disorders and telling the stories of eating disorders. And I find that fascinating. And I also find it, I guess, a factor of life or a part of life, given that I have always had cable TV in my life, that it never occurred to me that there were so many made-for-TV movies that involved eating disorders. And so the theme and the trend that you spotted and how you detailed it in your chapter was just an eye-opener for me. And so help me understand how it is that you actually even detected that trend. As you said, everything you came to learn about eating disorders, you learned from Lifetime TV. When did that dawn on you?
I think it was really when I was starting to look for resources on eating disorders. So in my dissertation, I'm talking about artists who are making artwork about eating disorders. So I'm just trying to find what kind of sense and public awareness existed about eating disorders. Public awareness of eating disorders didn't really start until the 70s, which I thought was a bit late, especially because, by the 50s, 60s, there was a pretty clear diagnosis, at least naming of anorexia, but there was very little public awareness of it. No one was talking about it. No one knew how to treat it. And that is arguably still kind of being worked out today. And so I was just kind of trying to figure out how society started to learn about eating disorders. And that led me to kind of realize, well, I learned about them through TV. And then I wanted to find the first movie that was based on them on eating disorders. And it turns out that was based on a book by a doctor who was actually working with eating disorders. So it had this kind of interesting journey from when I think in the 80s, they were really being made to share information with people. Like, Kate's Secret, one of the first films from 86.
Kate's Secret originally aired on network TV in 1986, and it starred Meredith Baxter. Now, she did this movie during one of the 7 seasons of Family Ties, which was the series that you might recall, perhaps most notably because it starred Michael J. Fox as the very memorable character Alex P. Keaton. Meredith Baxter acted in all 171 episodes of this beloved series. Meredith Baxter herself is a child of Hollywood. Her mother was Whitney Blake, a writer and an actor on shows in the 50s and 60s, who then went on to write for Norman Lear's original One Day at a Time, which aired 1975 to 1984. So in 1986, in the middle of Family Ties, Meredith Baxter was an incredible mom figure to all of America. She was the gold standard. She was a bit of a golden lady. Family Ties was this sitcom that regularly waded into those coming-of-age issues, a little bit more sophisticated than the Brady Bunch. This was Meredith Baxter's 3rd series. She previously had been in Bridget Loves Bernie, 1972 and 73, which was a bit of a breakthrough. And the TV series Family, which was a real serious drama. Again, more coming-of-age issues and family issues. And so Meredith Baxter had all the audience cred she needed, and she brought that to Kate's Secret. Now, this movie is billed, or at least the description embedded within the YouTube clip that I pulled this audio from, is a beautiful woman married to a successful lawyer, and the perfect suburban mother turns out to be a closeted bulimic. That's how TV Guide likely described it. That's the text that comes along with the video. Find it on YouTube for a good idea of how graphically binges were depicted back then. The entire movie, Kate's Secret, is on YouTube. This clip, however, is from a Meredith Baxter interview that's posted on YouTube that only bears a cryptic TV marker that says TV movie superstars, women you love. I won't even go into what I think about that description.
I've had more people come up to me about this movie, stewardesses on airplanes. Miss Baxter, I want to thank you so much. Yeah, saved my life.
Finally coming back.
Sounds like you're ready to go home.
That I am.
In Kate's Secret, Meredith Baxter's character finally finds redemption and overcomes a life-threatening eating disorder.
I just want you to know that I don't blame you for my illness. It must have been very hard for you. It was very hard for me, too.
So you can imagine that when researching eating disorders as depicted on television, Newman gained perspective on the evolution of public knowledge, awareness, and even medicine's approach to this issue.
And bulimia at that time had only become an actual independent disease of anorexia the year before. Bulimia hadn't really even been talked about that much. So these shows had this interesting public service component at the beginning. They get a little bit more kind of entertaining as it goes on. They were really the only way people were talking about them.
I was in college in 1986 when Kate's Secret aired. And when I think about even how much cable TV there was, and in the other interviews with Amanda Lotz in other parts in this series, we talk about how it is that cable picked up the made-for-TV movie that ABC, NBC, and CBS decided were too expensive, and it was too much of an investment, and it was too much of a hassle. And so cable took what little money it had, or those networks were starting to build their brand based on made-for-TV movies. And that combined with the baby boom. So I am at the very end of the baby boom, and we have Gen Xers coming up. And so, a 16-year-old Gen Xer in 1985 would probably have been much more aware of eating disorders. There was just more conversation about it. And there was no, other than a high school health class, Or if you were in college, maybe you took some women's studies class, you might have learned a little bit, but doctors weren't talking about it. Counselors weren't talking about it. The shame was comparable to addiction. It was comparable to what little we knew about mental health. And when we think about mental health in the 80s, I can't help but use the pin in the map of Patty Duke on the Phil Donahue show in 1986, 87, after she wrote her memoir about being bipolar and used the word lithium on TV for the first time. That's the mid 80s. We had nothing to work with. There was Lifetime basically putting out the welcome mat. Are we still seeing eating disorder movies today?
The last one that I know of aired in 2014. I would say there was kind of a silence on this front since the mid 2000s, because instead of fictionalized dramas, you were starting to see like Intervention and other shows that actually dealt with real people who had eating disorders. So that took kind of precedent, I think, over fictional eating disorders. This film in 2014, what distinguished it from all the others is it dealt with the new like online epidemic of these pro-anorexia, pro-bulimia communities. So it had a really different kind of take, which in a way is the same thing, because a lot of people don't know that this whole underground community exists where these girls talk about their best friend Anna, and they're actually referring to anorexia. There are all these kind of secret websites, secret Instagrams and things like that that are dealing with eating disorders and actually like providing tips to people and things like that. It's maintained kind of true to this earlier mission. They've been more focused, Lifetime has, in the past couple of years on female empowerment. I think in light of Me Too and these other kind of topics, they're, on one hand, they're still producing the kind of entertaining content that we know and love, but they're also looking towards investing in women directors, more positive stories. So I feel like they will come back to eating disorders. And in fact, they figured on some of their scripted programming. But for the current moment, we haven't seen too many recently.
How many in all do you believe are, eating disorder genre movies are out there?
14, give or take, depending on how you're counting. One of the things that's interesting, just to be clear, is that Kate's Secret actually first aired on a network channel on NBC. And so a lot of these movies will air first run on a network and then sit kind of abandoned, if you will, until they get picked up. So like For the Love of Nancy is actually a pretty iconic one because it stars Tracey Gold.
Remind everybody who Tracey Gold is and why she's noteworthy.
For the Love of Nancy came out in 94, and it was not long after Tracey Gold had been made public that she suffered with an eating disorder herself. She was one of the stars of Growing Pains. She actually, as she's filming For the Love of Nancy, she's recovering from an eating disorder herself. And that movie aired repeatedly when I was growing up. And I've even read that some health classes showed that movie to kids in high school, which, one of the continuous problems with the eating disorder movie is that as much as it's, trying to instruct people on what not to do and how to seek help and all those things, it also really shows people how to become an anorexic. There have been some big celebrities who've kind of come out and said, I saw these movies and I learned skills on how to be a better anorexic. There's always this interesting phenomenon I've noticed with eating disorder movies that they do, I think, absolutely provide help and a sense of community for people who suffer, but, they have to include these kind of more serious moments. For the Love of Nancy's kind of climactic moment was she was so unwell that her parents actually decided to sue for guardianship over her, even though she was an adult. Interestingly, they don't actually get guardianship over her, but she does decide to seek treatment. And it's one of the ones based on a true story. So it had an impact because it was kind of an interesting angle with the lawsuit, but then it also had Tracey Gold, who was very much in the moment talking about her eating disorder. She even did a reality show 5 years ago or so about her eating disorder and trying to help more people.
Nancy felt unable to control anything in her life. She was going away to college, separating from you. She saw her ordered, familiar life falling apart.
But why stop eating?
She found something she could control, what she ate. And anorexia is about control. Clinical studies have shown that although it may be triggered by puberty, separation from friends and parents, as well as body chemistry and biology, at its core, anorexia is a manifestation of the family dynamic. It's a family problem.
Why didn't I have a clue that something was wrong with her? We're close. We've done everything together. How did I miss it?
You have to understand, not eating is not the disease, it's the symptom. The disease is the way Nancy feels about herself.
Listeners, again, the fact that it was Tracey Gold in this 1994 movie is remarkable. It's as significant as Meredith Baxter 8 years earlier. Gold, you may recall, was one of the 3 kids in another wholesome family sitcom that looked an awful lot like The Family in Family Ties. Growing Pains aired 1985 to 1992, revolving around the Seaver family. Tracey Gold played Carol Seaver, who was not only the middle child and the only daughter, but the one who at the age of 19 started gaining a little weight. In 1988, then kind of into the 3rd season, give or take, scripts were starting to be written that took into account Gold's weight gain, modest weight gain, we can imagine. But as a 19-year-old, still, everybody's sensitive to it. And those took the form of fat jokes. Yes, in 1988, fat jokes were on TV, or the writers thought that they should be on TV. A little note about those writers. According to IMDb, during the series run, there were nearly 50 writers across the show's 7 seasons, and men outnumbered women 2-1. So regardless of how those fat jokes came to be, Gold's battle became not just with the network's directive to lose weight, but with herself as well, because life is fragile, and psyches are fragile, and egos, and the drive to succeed. It's all hardwired for some people. Throughout the 90s, then, tabloids and People magazine and the National Enquirer, they really brought Gold's situation to a common understanding. She didn't hold back. And those same publications provided updates about her well-being, which at sometimes was actually quite scary. It was anything but well-being. So For the Love of Nancy stars a face that some of you may find familiar, Jill Clayburgh, who is a talent of her own right, passing far too soon, as the mom, and another very, very well-regarded actor, William Devane, played her dad. But wait, listeners, there's more. You can't do an eating disorder genre episode of a podcast without talking about
Olympic gymnast who was just a staple of American TV and athletics, Kathy Rigby. And she was in movie. Which movie was she in and what was her role?
A movie about gymnastics called Perfect Body. Gymnastics and dance are common themes in these movies because, of course, those are places where girls are expected to be very thin and need to be thin to do their job, to look the part. And so she played a coach in this movie about a young woman who was becoming a better gymnast, began developing eating disorder. She was the good coach in the movie, the supportive coach. And, one of the, I think, important moments in the movie is when she gives a speech telling this young girl that she knows what she's going through and has been there herself, and that the girl really needs to take care of herself because if she doesn't, she's going to lose it all. Coming from Kathy Rigby, I don't know how many young women would have immediately made the connection at the time, but certainly anyone who has a kind of gymnastics knowledge or interest in the field would have recognized that that's even more significant coming from her. And it was a big deal. She doesn't have the same legacy as Jane Fonda, who kind of came out about her bulimia, and that's been this really big thing she's talked about. There are not a ton of articles or discussions about Kathy Rigby's eating disorders. So to me, that was a really significant moment in the film.
Because even in the 80s, if you took a serious topic like eating disorders, there were people who just did not want to be thinking about that, let alone find that entertaining. It was, however, relevant, and there's no question that a milestone in our understanding of mental health for women, in eating disorders for girls and women, was the death of Karen Carpenter in 1983. And so here, it's starting to build some momentum. And in 1989, then the Karen Carpenter story was a movie. Emily, help us understand its significance.
It originally aired on CBS. It's one I know that a lot of people remember. It's a powerful story because, we knew about her eating disorder, and, the family worked on the film and had a relationship with the people who were making it. They didn't necessarily want to shy away from the brutalities of it. And the film ends in this kind of moment where you see Karen Carpenter has been to treatment. She's eating a little bit. She's getting better. And that's when she dies. So that there's this kind of like crushed hope. It, of course, emphasizes the effects that eating disorders can have on your body long term. Cynthia Gibb plays Karen Carpenter, who was a popular kind of soap opera type actress at the time. She is extraordinarily thin. And like Tracey Gold and For the Love of Nancy, like these films almost become hard to watch because the women look so sick. They're physically deteriorating. And that's definitely conveyed here. There's a little bit of controversy when the film came out because I don't know if the Carpenter family ended up being exactly happy with it. It put a very famous face on eating disorders. And making it in 89, there was a little bit of distance from the time of her death, which allowed it to be taken both more seriously and not feel like it's exploitive of her. And, there were not a lot of people still in the 80s coming out with their eating disorders. This was a way of like making it accessible for people with someone who was really beloved and who had so much to live for.
It created education. First of all, it expanded the generational interest and understanding of eating disorders so that it wasn't just perhaps grandparents thinking this is just somebody doing this for attention, which if once the genre got going, that was certainly a concern that all this was girls seeking attention, and it was part of peer pressure and everything. And in fact, the Karen Carpenter story, such a beloved American icon, such a treasured voice, who was challenged, not even in from a career perspective where, yes, she was required to be thin. She was a TV woman. They had specials and they had a series, she and her brother Richard. I think it was the understanding that it is a very dangerous disease. It is one that even when you think you're recovering from it, it holds lifetime medical complications and medical dangers that we didn't understand at the time. So as tragic as the Karen Carpenter situation was, I think that film really did open people's eyes, and it is memorable. She is the first one that we knew about. And even still today, as people come out, as Jane Fonda comes out, I would kind of wonder whether or not Jane Fonda sat in her living room in 1989 and watched the Karen Carpenter story.
Because here's how we got the news when it originally aired in 1983.
Karen Carpenter was 32. Paramedics were called in to her parents' home this morning after she collapsed, but she was pronounced dead at the hospital. Ms. Carpenter reportedly had long suffered from anorexia nervosa, in which irrational fear of being overweight leads to compulsive dieting.
I'm not sure what's creepier, the stiff and stilted language that was used, though writers really didn't know any better, or the fact that these news clips have been saved by people over the years and posted on YouTube.
Let me ask you to put your art history hat on for a minute, or your Herstory hat on. What would you say the importance of this genre's role in American popular culture has been?
I think the main importance that these eating disorder movies give is both the providing the public with information and sharing women's stories. I mean, at the heart of this, the reason this was under-researched for so long is because it was a woman's sickness, right? Now, as you noted, that's not the case anymore by any means. I think drawing attention to that, making it where people could talk about it, teaching people about it, providing tools. I mean, all of these films are accompanied by, phone numbers, people to call, now websites, resources, where can you get help? It's really this information with resources and this larger idea of sharing women's stories, creating different communities, and even kind of bonding over stories like this so that women and men and people of color, who are both men and people of color, are increasingly being diagnosed with eating disorders, can start feeling like, okay, this isn't something that should be shamed. It's a disease. It's a sickness. It needs help rather than, being ostracized for it.
And there will be generations still, the older part of the baby boom who perhaps is now healthy, doesn't necessarily want to talk about what they were doing in their 20s, women in particular. Although Jane Fonda, bless her heart, continues to tell the story and say it's okay to talk about what's going on. Not every woman feels that way, and not every woman is even sure she'd be accepted. So I agree with you, Emily, that it has served to break the ice for parents to talk to counselors, to physicians, for solutions to be sought, and for the conversation to finally come out in the open. And before the age of the internet, TV was, in fact, the best place, the only place in many respects, to have that conversation broachable. We're going to wrap things up here, but as you may know, that when I wrap things up with somebody who is as engaged a viewer of television as you are, I like to ask the question, name 3 shows from your formative years.
Felicity was a show that was imperative to me because she was like 1 or 2 years older than me. So it was like she was my life choices, basically. Like, I was getting ready to go to college, that was something that really stayed with me. We even had like Felicity watching parties in college when I got there. Gilmore Girls is a show that I've watched the whole season through probably 15 times, if not more. It's what I actually have on the TV a lot of times when I'm sleeping. It was so important to me that when I finished my master's thesis, I actually kind of hid all the names and the acknowledgments of the characters because I felt like they shaped the work, even though it's completely unrelated to them, but they got me through it. Cheating a little bit because I got to know it in my 20s, but it was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I did not watch when it aired. I made fun of one of my good friends who watched it. And then when I was writing my dissertation and I was, living by myself, I just started watching it, and she was a badass. And I was like, this is amazing. How have I never watched this? And I'm talking about my dissertation is filled. It's 13 different, women artists pushed me to finish it, which is.
Those are great stories, great series, and very, very indicative, obviously, of your age. And yet just a reminder that Buffy coming out of the CW and Gilmore Girls coming out of the CW, and Felicity was on
WB, I guess, but eventually.
Yeah. But Felicity was on one of the big networks, right?
No, it was WB.
All 3 of them. Okay. So actually, Amanda Lotz and I get into that because there was a place where some of this experimental, female-themed, female-led, they were an important audience, and they were woefully underserved everywhere else. We cannot minimize any of that because, you know what? We have so much social change right now because of those 3 shows alone. Just the bonding, as you said, that took place. All right. And lastly, how can people get a hold of you and the books, I guess, thus far that you have out there for sale?
They're all on Amazon. And wherever you buy books, you can get them. They can order them from you. And the best way to get a hold of me is through my website. You can contact me directly through there. And it's just my name. So it's www.emilylnewman.com. And that is EMILYL Newman, NEWMAN. Contact me through the website. You can see more information on books and all the things I've written. and couple pictures of my cute dog. So
A cute dog indeed. And a pat on the head to young Fred for staying quiet through this whole interview, because we've had a lot to cover and have done a great job of it. Eating disorders on TV. I never dreamed that when I started this podcast almost 4 years ago, that you and I, now having never met, and I encountered you through, Google searches and just a tremendous book. Emily Newman, it has been a great pleasure to have you here on Advanced TV Herstory.
Thanks to noted television scholars and authors Amanda Lotz and Emily Newman for contributing to my understanding of this corner of the industry and for taking time out of their schedules to sit for our interviews. Find the works of and information about both of these fine women in the show notes as well as in the season description on our website, which is tvherstory.com. Do you like what you hear? Support us today on Patreon. That's right. It's an online tip jar that you can access from our podcast's homepage. So go to tvherstory.com, scroll down past the episode player where you'll see a box that reads, Become a Patron, and follow the directions. Because just like public radio, we have basic infrastructure costs here at Advanced TV Herstory. We bring you no advertising. And just like public radio, your pocket change each month can make a big difference. That difference comes in the form of the very talented Jen Eads, our audio technician, and Catherine Yang, our video and social media platform director. The three of us love to bring you this great content and hope you find it valuable and innovative and worth your time. Music found through all our episodes is called Take Me Higher. It's by Jazzer, found at Free Music Archive. And yes, indeed, we've sent him some money into his virtual tip jar. Find our Twitter and Instagram handles at our website, and there's a place at the site for you to send us a message. And of course, if your podcast app gives you the chance to write a quick review about Advanced TV Herstory, well, know that we'd be deeply humbled for a minute of your time. You listeners, bringing you the stories and understanding about how, who, and what we see on TV, that's why I podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.